Hello and welcome to the Aid Station. I'm Chris Robb, and today massively excited to be heading to the Gold Coast in Australia to catch up with 3 times Tour de France green jersey winner and now commentator on races like the Tour de France, Robbie McEwen. Great to see you, Robbie.
Yeah, g'day, Chris. Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
No, fantastic, mate. And you've got an amazing story. Obviously, your cycling background, but you also organise events. You're now a commentator. Why don't you take a couple of minutes just to tell us a little bit of the Robbie McEwen story, how it all started and how you got to where you are now, please?
Yeah, well, okay. I guess there's bits that I'll have to skip over, but I started out as a BMX racer when I was a kid. Did that until my late teens when I took up cycling at 18. Turned pro at 22. I was a professional rider for 16 years, rode 12 Tours de France, won the green jersey 3 times, won a dozen stages. Came out the other end of my pro cycling career a month shy of my 40th birthday. Since then, I've had a mixture of jobs, I say like that, because it's never been work. They're all sort of hobby things that generate some cash flow. I mean, you got to get paid, but yeah, they've been fun things to do. So I've worked with the last team that I raced for, Orica Green Edge, the Australian World Tour team. I worked with them for 2 seasons with some of the younger riders and doing a bit of public relations. I also got into a broadcast, doing some commentary on things like the classics, Flanders, Roubaix, Liège, for an Australian broadcaster, SBS, and was also going to the Tour de France with them. And as my commentary gigs became more frequent and I got a bit more polished, I was chosen alongside Matthew Keenan to do the world feed for the Tour de France. So we now commentate on the tour for some 52 countries around the world, the English world feed. So that's something we're very proud to be doing. Outside of that, I've got a few little side gigs. I own a cafe, I do some custom kit. I've got a couple other cycling products, and I organise a Gran Fondo here on the Gold Coast every year. This year's going to be year number 9, and it's on the 10th and 11th of October.
Wow, plenty of hats and also a renovator. Just before we came on air, you just got back from renovating a flat covered in plaster, mate. Fantastic, and yeah, I know lots of people rave about the work you're doing with Matt, and I remember we first met in Singapore at Cycle Singapore, and Phil Liggett was there, and I remember him clearly to me one day saying that Robbie's got the potential to be the next Phil Liggett. So I guess that's a great compliment, and hopefully you go on to have the kind of career that he's had. Mate, what's it been like in COVID times in Australia, and what's the impact? Obviously, you run a cafe. Has that stayed open, and what's life been like?
Well, there has been a significant impact on some aspects of life. Others is a little bit business as usual. I guess the drawback is that business hasn't been business as usual. As you just mentioned with my cafe, we didn't have to shut down completely, but we had to go into full takeaway mode with social distancing in effect, and so that had a big impact on business. We were down about 50%, but fortunately here in Australia, I think our government's doing a fantastic job looking after businesses, trying to keep them going through this COVID pandemic, with what they call the JobKeeper program, getting people on Job Seeker. So there's social benefits. There's money being provided to businesses and individuals, people who are out of work, businesses trying to keep going. And that seems to be what is really pulling us through this. Now things are starting to open up again. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, but I still think it's just a pinprick of light, and the tunnel is still going to be very long. I mean, apart from businesses, of course, all events have been off, all sports have been off. Some are just starting back up again now, like the National Rugby League competition and the Australian Football League is starting back up without crowds. They're now going to start having crowds this week. So we're moving along really small steps, but very positive steps in the right direction to get the wheels turning again. So, of course, like everywhere around the world, it's been a huge interruption to our lives, but we just keep pushing through. And I think we're actually very lucky here, the way it's been handled, that we haven't had a terrible amount of cases. I mean, we've had some people pass away, unfortunately, but compared to some other countries, we've had a very, very low death rate. The actions taken by the government to quarantine people, to cut down infections and, as they say, slow down the curve, it has worked here, and we've had hardly any cases over the last 2 months. And as a result, we're starting to open back up. Hopefully, it's going to go the same around the world, and we can start to open up internationally as well.
You get back on a plane, you were saying that you probably would have been flying out today or tomorrow to go over to the Tour de France, and you have an annual trip, your wife, Angelique, from Belgium, and you're going to spend time with family. So hopefully not too long before that'll happen, and we'll be traveling around. It'd be great to see some bike racing again, which we've certainly all missed, and I'm sure you have. You've been able to get out on the bike yourself during these times?
You know what? I've been able to get out all the time. We haven't had any restrictions on going outside to exercise. In fact, where I live just across the road from the beach, and quite a popular walking path, walking, running, dog walkers, you name it, and across from the beach. Also a popular area for cyclists to use up and down. And you know what? Over the last couple of months, I have never seen it busier. With all these people who weren't able to go to work and to wherever else, even that, gyms were closed, all these places to work out were all closed down. So everybody seemed to be getting into running and riding. One of the big pluses here during COVID has been for the bike stores. Bike shops they're all saying it's been Christmas every day for 2 months until we were sold out and couldn't get any more stock. They have had their best year ever in selling products, because people were looking for ways to exercise and get active. And, the amount of people running as well, I'm sure any stores that were able to still sell running shoes were doing a booming trade. Following on from that, I think the physios are going to be doing a booming trade. More people who took up running with such fervour when there was nothing else for them to do. But, it's been good on that front, being able to get out and exercise, and I've been able to do as many kilometres as I want, and also do the other things I like to do: mountain biking, go surfing. I've been playing a fair bit of golf, and I felt like I was getting better. Handicap got down to 13, and now blown back out towards 15. I think moments that many golfers would recognise. You think you've got it covered, you think you know what you're doing, and then you get much worse.
Yeah, and you put all that pressure on yourself to take it further down. And I guess you'd be a man who's used to pressure and obviously racing and many challenges. What have been some of the challenges that you've faced during this time? We were talking about, one of the challenges constantly having to change the date for your Grand Fondo, but there have been a few other challenges that you've faced during these times?
I think the biggest challenge is not getting strangled by my wife. Because I do travel a lot throughout the year, and I've got to be honest, one of the things I really loved is actually just being at home and not having to go anywhere, not go to an airport, not sit on a plane, not be living in a hotel somewhere. So it's been really great to spend so much time at home. But yeah, honestly, since we've been together since 1996, my wife and I, Angelique, we've never spent so much time together. This is the longest period we've ever been together the whole time. But it's great. We're getting on all fine. So I don't want to start any rumours. It's been really good. But we're just laughing about the fact that it has been the longest. But I guess the challenges, of course, are for me really just that, wanting things to get underway, and I really love doing the commentary, and I'm missing the fact that I'm also not flying out to go to France to start commentating on the Tour de France, which was scheduled to begin in 10 days' time. It has been put off by 2 months. It's scheduled 29 August to 20 September. And at the moment, they're saying full steam ahead. Everything's happening as planned for this reschedule. So not too long to wait to get underway. And I guess to warm us up, Matthew Keenan and myself on a few nights for the Australian TV SBS, we'll be doing some web hosting on some classic stages of the Tour de France. So classic stages from the last 13 years will be aired in the original time slot of the Tour de France. So we'll have something to do to get us going and sort of start our preparation towards the Tour de France.
And whet the appetite. Wow, that's fantastic. And, lots of virtual races happening. Have you been commentating on any of the virtual races?
I haven't been involved in commentating any virtual races. And I reckon it's a pretty tough gig, actually, because you can't really pick anybody from anybody. They're all those avatars more or less the same.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is what it is. I think it's a good way to keep people engaged, particularly the riders. They've got some sort of competition to look forward to. I wouldn't say it's a fantastic spectator-friendly event, but it's something. But I think everyone agree we just can't wait till the real racing starts again. I think the virtual racing, it has its place. It's a good thing. Not particularly my cup of tea, but I think these platforms like Zwift are doing fantastic things, and it's good for people that love to use it.
Yeah, no, and we are right place, right time for them. That's pretty amazing. What do you sense of, some of these riders have been performing incredibly on the bikes. What's it going to be like for them now getting off, many of them coming off lots of indoor training and now getting on the bikes? They've obviously got a couple of months still. They're going to be race ready by the time the tour comes around, or is you going to see people blowing up much more than normal?
Well, it's going to be really interesting for the ones who are stuck inside a lot. The only thing they could do is indoor training. It tends to be shorter sessions, higher intensity. I think initially it was really hard for riders to put any sort of schedule into their training to know what they were getting ready for. So you don't want to go too hard too early. So I think a lot of riders had to be careful of what they were doing in those virtual races and on the indoor trainers. Now it seems across Europe, there's plenty of time between the first World Tour races from the beginning of August. They've still got over a month, nearly 6 weeks of training outside. And, guys are getting back out on the open road, into the mountains and doing group trainings with their team. So I think it's going to be more a case of not so difficult coming into real races off virtual races, but just coming into real races just off the back of training camps.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
interesting.
That race conditioning, there might be a few surprises. I mean, we'll learn, who are the guys who are the best trainers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so usually there'd be these months of build up to it, and then now it's virtually going to have maybe a couple of weeks of racing at best before they get on the bike.
Yeah, although some guys are quite used to that. You look at Chris Froome; he might only race 70 days a year, if that. Some others only race about 50, but they'll do another 150 days in training camps. And some of those teams' training camps are notorious for being harder than the racing. I remember a young French guy, Kenny Elizondo, when he raced with Team Sky, he got called up to come and replace a rider at a race. He said, "I'm really glad I get to come to the race because it's easier than training camp."
Okay, wow, okay. Yeah, well, that puts a bit of perspective, huh? Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about leadership. I like to talk about leadership. Chris Froome, obviously, going to be back on the bike leading his team. You've been in leadership.
Is he?
Is he?
Well, there was talk of a mid-season shift by Froome. He's being offered.
Oh, there was. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Niall says, "Well, I'm not going to give up a leadership position. The road will decide." The old cliche, the road will decide. Geraint Thomas, he's also won the Tour. He'd like to be the leader. And then, but more recently, I think PR, as much as anything, they've pulled together a bit more and they're starting to toe the line of as long as one of the team wins.
That's right.
Mario at Jumbo-Visma, who seemed to be the most dangerous competition for Team Sky at the Tour de France. But yeah, like you say, he's definitely one of the leaders. Don't discount him. I don't think we'll see him in a domestique role.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And I mean, talking about leadership, I mean, you've been in leadership roles over the years. I always like to ask a question on the aid station of, any particular leadership tips or techniques for people that are watching. We've got people from all our aspects of the industry and beyond the industry here. Anything that you've kind of learnt from leaders that you've followed over the years that you think might be a valuable tip?
I think the most important thing I've learned from people who have been good leaders, whether it be in business or in sport, is to know every aspect of your business and be prepared to participate in every aspect of your business, whether it be sweeping a floor or signing the checks and everything in between. If you don't know how it's done, you don't know your business well enough. And in sport, sometimes you've got to, in cycling terms, ride for somebody else, sacrifice your chances on a day, in a race, for a week, to then get the team behind you. So I think it's about being prepared to roll your sleeves up and do what needs to be done, whatever the position is. Show the others how invested you are in your position in the company or team, and always praise people.
It's a great end.
Hasn't gone try and help them learn.
Yeah, nice. Okay, yeah, that's a great analogy. Sacrifice for other people on the team from a riding perspective. Love it. Fantastic, Robbie. You've inspired many people over the years. You know, we're speaking in the beginning. I think you had over 200 race wins. I think was your career, wasn't it? Something like that. Inspired so many people. Have you got an inspirational story that's either from your racing years or maybe come out of COVID? Anything to leave the viewers with?
Not not one in particular, but again, my background, the cycling theme, um, even as a rider and knowing what it's like, but watching riders who have crashed, injured themselves, or just put themselves so far behind the eight ball that it seems impossible, and they are just so determined, whatever the circumstances, to push through. And sometimes it's for a win, sometimes it's just to purely stay in the race, sometimes it's just to get to the finish line on that day, to not be beaten by the race, not be beaten by the circumstances. You know, we've seen these pictures, sometimes these memes that go around. A footballer gets a bump and he's rolling on the ground, says he's hurt, and then the cyclist with blood dripping off him, skin missing, and his clothes torn to shred. Cyclist says, "I'm okay."
Yeah, how many times have we seen that? Amazing. You're a case in point. I've had the pleasure of interviewing you and talking about your famous win in Canterbury, where it seemed like it was all lost, and you get up and go, and the team gets around you, and that's what I love about cycling. Can't wait to see it back on the Tour de France, to hear your voice again on the TV as opposed to here right now on the computer. Robbie, always a pleasure to catch up. Thanks so much for making the time. Look forward to hearing you again soon on TV. Thanks so much, mate.
It's my pleasure. Great to catch up with you.